So things are getting out of hand. The longer Trump takes to call China, the worse this economic war is going to spiral into oblivion. Now, we have seen the US backtrack on big tariffs on electronics made in China. Now, Beijing calls it a small step forward, but make no mistake, the Chinese, they are not going to back down. They realize that behind all the bluster, behind all the big bold moves, the US economy is actually very fragile. And now China's wrapping up the pain, dishing out some medicine of their own on the key US industry. Now, Beijing has ordered all their airlines to boycott US giant Boeing, not to take any further deliveries of Boeing jets like the 747. But the story gets worse. China is also halting any purchase of aircraft parts and equipment from any US company. So even if you are a small supplier, you are now cut away from the Chinese market. We are seeing China turning up the dial on the oven. Now the 125% tariff on US imports already makes many stuff unviable to buy. The price just doesn't make sense anymore. But Beijing is determined to close any loophole to shut US companies out from the Chinese market. The tit-for-tat escalation is not over yet. If the bond market forced Trump to backtrack, perhaps collapsing revenues of American companies will force his hand once again. When you refuse to take deliveries, that also means you are not going to pay for the planes as well. So Boeing won't just be facing a future revenue collapse, they might have to take a loss on some of the jets. Around 10 Boeing 737 MAX aircraft are waiting to enter Chinese airline fleets. Now, some of the jets are still in Seattle while others are in the Zhoushan finishing center in eastern China. But there's a chance not all of them have been fully paid for. The Chinese government would probably reimburse their own airlines then allow the deals to conclude. Now, we have gone well past US LNG and soybeans. China is now hammering on US manufacturing itself. And this will sting because it directly confronts Trump's promise of more industry jobs for Middle America. China must have heard this speech from Trump and realized it's time to go all out. Trump will never back down without some encouragement.
Right now, China's paying a 104% tariff. Think of it, 104%. Now, it sounds ridiculous, but they charged us for many items 100%, 125%. Many countries have. They've ripped us off left and right. But now it's our turn to do the ripping.
Now, when it comes to the size of major industrial markets, the US does not hold all the cards. From cars to semiconductors, Chinese demand is the biggest in the world. And the same goes for jet planes as well. China is the biggest market for commercial airplanes, and Trump's trade war has backfired on Boeing, which means a lot of manufacturing jobs could go kaput. In 2018, Chinese buyers accounted for a quarter of all Boeing deliveries. But it's the demand going forward that's most concerning, and according to the company itself, they expect China will need almost 9,000 more planes over the next 20 years. The Chinese consumer is getting more affluent. This story is no longer about just lifting people out from poverty, but pushing people up to the middle class. And that would entail more air travel around the world and within China itself, which is a very big country. Now, this level of miscalculation is just legendary. If you're invested in Boeing, this is very bad news for the stock price. Realize that Beijing has nothing to lose by cutting away Boeing planes. And it's not even necessary for me to talk about all the recent accidents or all the plane faults. By cutting away all deliveries, China doesn't even care that Boeing is building their planes in China. And this move is more strategic than we think. Firstly, across all China's major airlines, the bulk of the planes are not from Boeing. Companies like China's Southern and Eastern rely a lot on jets from Airbus, which is a French company. It's important to note that in yellow is Comac, that's China's own jet plane producer. And now that Boeing is cut off, Beijing can pursue their agenda on both ends. Give more business to Airbus, who will be China's main supplier, while building up Comac. Building up Comac will take some time, and so far they've only delivered around 15 C919 planes since 2023. But in the meanwhile, Beijing will be using this as leverage to talk trade with the EU. And realize what the EU is dealing with. Their biggest obstacle today in trade is not China. Ironically, it's their traditional ally, the US, that is making things extremely difficult for Europe.
Have offered zero for zero tariffs on cars and industrial goods.
Is that not enough?
Well, the EU, no, it's not. The EU has been very tough over the years. I always say it was formed to really do damage to the United States in trade. That's the reason it was formed. It was formed with all of the countries from Europe, I guess most of them, not all of them, but most of them. And they formed together to create a little bit of a monopoly situation, to create a unified force against the United States for trade.
So you heard Trump. EU's zero for zero tariff deal isn't enough. Does he want Europe to pay reparations for the trading deals of the past? We just don't know. It's literally impossible to deal with the US at this point, and China knows this. Trump has given Beijing all the leverage that they need to swing Europe to their side. And here's why China now has the cards. Europe relies a lot on the export of goods and services to survive. And if you think China has an overcapacity problem, Europe is the one that has a ton of production. EU export of goods and services accounts for over 50% of their GDP. And if the US decides to hit them with a 20% reciprocal tariff, we could see a collapse across the board in Europe. They are too dependent on the US market, but now China can come in and offer to buy even more planes for the airline fleet. And the amount of bargaining power here is enormous. This comes at a time when Europe is struggling to reindustrialize while going into huge amounts of debt. Just look at Germany. China will make up 20% of global aircraft demand over the next 20 years. By transferring this demand to Airbus, all sorts of deals can be struck, and a big one will be de-dollarizing global trade even further. Just ask yourself, when China buys all their Boeing shortfall from France, will they want to transact in US dollars? Now, I bet the majority, if not all of the deals, will be done in either the euro or the Chinese RMB. And either way you look at it, that's still de-dollarization. Every time China stops buying stuff from a US supplier, it gives the world more opportunities to dump the dollar for bilateral trade. There are just so many ways this is bad for the US. And a big shout out to our sponsor today, Longbridge. We know how important it is to invest. Inflation is not going to stop, and the best way to protect our wealth is to invest. Now, Longbridge is an investing platform that I use to trade the markets. It's an awesome commission-free trading app loaded with powerful tools and data to start your investing journey. You can load up on individual stocks and ETFs, including gold miners. They also have money market funds that help you earn generous yield as rates continue to stay high. Now, one big trend is the rebirth of China's markets as the economic struggle gets more brutal. And if you are looking to buy stocks in the Hong Kong market, Longbridge is a good platform to start. You'll be able to enjoy lifetime commission-free trades in the Hong Kong market. Plus, you can also access the US markets and Singapore stocks as well. Longbridge has an exciting industry chain feature that I really enjoy. It allows you to identify potential investment opportunities across the supply chain. Discover key competitors of any company around. Best of all, if you sign up today, there are welcome rewards including free Apple and Nvidia shares. Deposit 2 grand for 30 days and execute 3 trades to get a bonus worth 125 Singapore dollars. In addition, enjoy an exclusive $18 cash coupon when you sign up and deposit the required amount. But that's not all. You will also get lifetime commission-free trading in the US stock market. So give Longbridge a try and start investing today. But there's also another problem. Because the US has tariffed the world, now Boeing is facing a higher cost of production for their planes as well. And the devastation is very real. Boeing depends a lot on imported components, and for the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, it's said that 60% of the components are sourced from overseas suppliers. You have wings from Japan, stabilizers from Italy, and avionics from the UK. And thanks to the tariffs, all these parts now cost at least 10% more to import in, and exporters won't eat the tariffs. This means the plane could now cost an additional $9 million more. That's a lot of money, especially when the whole economy is moving closer and closer towards a recession. Now that Boeing has lost China as a customer indefinitely, this would lead to a revenue crunch. It's likely they have to eat the tariffs across the board to bring in business. As if the situation can't get worse, we have now global airlines all over the world threatening to reject US planes thanks to Trump's trade war. And this is just horrible timing. Delta Airlines and Ryanair are saying they will delay deliveries of all their Boeing planes. the airline business is extremely price sensitive, especially when US consumers are on the brink of collapse. So things aren't looking good for US aviation companies. Boeing might be relegated to just building US fighter jets. The commercial market is getting out of reach the longer this tariff war drags on. But let's do an update on China's supply chain squeeze on US industries. Now, Trump's economic advisors have said many times that reshoring manufacturing is possible through the wonders of robots.
See, what's going to happen is robotics are going to replace the cheap labor that we've seen all across the world. I mean, think of what our factories did. They went to the cheapest labor in the whole world, slave labor, cheap labor, the worst environmental conditions, polluting the heck out of it. And then we bring back those cheap products here and we feel good about ourselves because we don't see the pain. But the pain is in our workers. The American workers have been given the raw deal. And what's going to happen now is we're going to build factories and we're going to train and we're going to have trade craft. We're going to do the greatest set of training ever. And our high school educated people, they're going to train to do robotics mechanics. It's kind of like a supercharged BMW mechanic,
Now let's play along and say that Lightning is 100% right, that you can use robots to replace labor in everything from t-shirt and shoe manufacturing all the way to building cars. Well, you still need to build those robots, don't you? And the trade war is going to make it that much harder to make things happen. Firstly, China is ahead in robotics. They account for over half of global robot installations. According to Morgan Stanley, the supply chain for humanoid robot components are predominantly Chinese. China controls 63% of companies involved in actuator parts production and rare earths processing. So riddle me this. What are the odds of China sharing the technology with the US now? Beijing cutting US companies away from the Chinese market already shows a big decoupling between the two economies. How about if the US wants to build their own? How about just obtaining the raw materials for their critical industries? Well, China just made things even harder for Trump's reshoring plans. They have cancelled all critical exports of rare earth minerals and magnets, and these are critical inputs for US auto, semiconductor, and aerospace industries. So the entire spectrum of manufacturing is now compromised. The difference between how the trade war is being fought is night and day. Losing the US consumer market will be painful, but without the Chinese ecosystem, the US simply has no other alternatives. Trump's economy doesn't have the money, they don't have the time to build a new supply chain from scratch. That will also mean investing outside of the US, which is completely at odds with the promise of reshoring everything back home. And as it stands, the US still relies heavily on China. 70% of all rare earth components, compounds, and metals, they all come from Chinese suppliers. Certain metals like scandium and yttrium have a 100% dependency on China. Yttrium is used in US military, in quantum computing, and to make MRI machines. Scandium is necessary for fuel cells as well as to make alloys for spacecraft. If you want to build up your robotics industry, you will need rare earths, and by extension, that means you need China as well. There's no escaping this fact. That's why a desperate U-turn is needed in trade policy. Cutting trade with China goes beyond just losing all those cheap domestic goods. And even then, the White House had to claw back their electronic tariffs or really face a total collapse of many US companies. And why do you think the US is so desperate to sign the minerals deal with Ukraine? Why do you think Besson flew all the way to Kiev for that resource grab? Well, Justin Wolfers from Michigan U just outlined the disaster US industries would be facing.
You had was Trump imposing tariffs of 125% on China, which basically was a way of saying for an American manufacturing firm that wants to import goods, inputs from China, he's made it incredibly expensive. You know what China did? Actually, they said, more of the same. You're going to make it expensive. I'm going to make it impossible. So whatever Trump thought he was doing, the Chinese just did more of it. And of the exact same form. Look, these rare earth minerals are incredibly important. They're a critical input into a range of manufacturing. And it's China showing that it can exert incredible economic might by being strategic in the way it's using tariffs and surgical and really hitting American industry right where it hurts.
Hopefully, the Trump team sees the writing on the wall. Lutnick believes that he has a full house, but in fact, he probably has a pair of trees at the very best. But let me know what you think. Can Boeing survive this shock from Beijing? And if not China, where else will the US get their rare earths from? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.